Hello everyone. So welcome to the 15th session in our Indian modern history course, and we are still in the theme 2. Today's session is on the land revenue policies. Till now in the theme 2 we have focused on the governor generals, right? We have studied from the times of the Robert Clive, who was a governor, then Warren Hastings, and from Warren Hastings we have led from 1773 we have led to the time of the Lord Dalhousie, right? 1856. So we have dealt with this much time, almost you can say 80 years. Now in between there are a lot of British policies. For example, in between, in the time of the Lord Cornwallis, we have dealt with the idea of permanent settlement, isn't it? So today we are going to read all these land revenue policies. These land revenue policies are very critical, and today's session in fact is one of the most important session in the modern history. Why? Not only in the modern history, but also it will be critical for you to understand economy. From economy also this is important. There is a topic in your GS3 paper, that is land reforms. So the idea of the land reforms, that what are these land reforms taken in the times of the Britishers, is also important, that the base has been set from this particular session. So in that regard, today's session becomes very, very important, and so many questions are being formed. We'll discuss a lot of questions on all the systems, and it's easy to understand as well. But more importantly, you'll understand that what is the situation of the Indian agriculture at the time of the independence because of these British policies. That is our main concern. So today's session, for example, today is the session 15th. We'll talk about the land revenue policies. In the next session, we'll talk about overall economic policies that are very much associated with today's session, land revenue policies only. Because obviously at that time, land was the main source of revenue for the East India Company. So we have to study that. Okay, let's start. Before that, let us do one question, very easy question. These are called the chronology based questions, and these are the questions you can expect in your UPSC. Okay, these are the questions that come in the which category? Strive category. Let us see this question. Vasco da Gama arrived in the Calicut in 1498. Which of the following personalities were living then? That means you need to know that which of these personalities were living. So you need to do a lot of interconnection thing, modern history, medieval history, and art and culture as well. So Babar, Rana Sanga, and Guru Nanak. Pause the video and try to answer this question. If you apply a bit of common sense, if you have a very vague idea about the things, then just try to answer this question. Then you'll realize that if you remember that the first battle of Panipat was fought between Babar and Ibrahim Lodi. Now that was fought in 1526, isn't it? When it was fought in 1526, obviously Babar was yet to come to India, but Babar was obviously alive. Yet to come, but he was alive. So Babar was there. Then Babar went on to fight with Rana Sanga. That means Rana Sanga was also a contemporary, then he must also be alive at that time. Common sense. Then Guru Nanak time period, you must know, very important. His time period was from 1469 to 1539, very fixed, and unlike the saints such as Kabir, his time period is known. So the question you can expect going on the questions, for example, that who was alive in the time of the Guru Nanak, or which of the Mughal rulers or the Delhi Sultanate rulers the Guru Nanak time period saw. Now, for example, within the Delhi, you don't have Akbar at this time, but you do have Babar, and you do have Humayun. Similarly, you have some of the dynasties of the Delhi Sultanate as well. So from that perspective, you need to prepare. So on the one parallel tracks, or the Bhakti saints will come, and the other people on the parallel track, or these dynasties and the political history will come, and they can ask you questions to cross reference these things, such as this question. So yes, Guru Nanak was alive when the Vasco da Gama came into India. Similarly, yes, Sikandar Lodi was there. Babar was not there, but Babar was born by then 1483. You don't have to remember this name. By common sense, you could have solved it. But need to remember when Babar died, 1530. And the Battle of Khanwa, which was signed between Babar and the Rana Sanga, was in 1527. ठीक है, चलो. So this question is one of the questions, but I'm trying to explain you one of the trends that you need to identify, and this is how you should prepare going forward as well. Chalo. Let us start today's session. Now, what was the Indian economy in the pre-colonial time? Indian economy was known as the crown jewel in the British Empire. That if the Indian economy collapses, of the British Empire loses India, British Empire will lose a very big, you say, source of economic prosperity. So before coming of the British, what about the Indian economy? Indian economy itself was an independent economy. Agriculture, yes, it was a dominant sector, but also, yes, we do have the manufacturing in the form of the handicrafts. These all things we already have. So yes, it was developed according to the needs of that time, according to the technologies which was available of that time. India was a very important trading nation that you must have read right from the Indus Valley civilization, that India used to trade a lot with, for example, Southeast Asia, for example, West Asia. All this thing India used to trade a lot. These were the pre-colonial time India. Then your Britishers have come and they have transformed this India into an economy which later on became surplus labor and very low productivity economy, which faced the phenomenon of deindustrialization, economy which faced the increasing number of people in the agricultural sector, which saw little to no modernization, less diversification, and which saw a unilateral free trade. We'll discuss all these ideas in the next session. So today we are ought to understand what these Britishers have done, and we'll try to understand starting with the very basic idea, that is the agriculture. And within the agriculture, how this land revenue policies was transformed, how the economic relations is transformed, how the relation of a cultivator to the land is transformed, that we ought to study today. Chalo. So first we need to understand the pre-British structure. Now we are coming into the land and the agriculture. When you have the pre-British structure, you have the situation of the land does not absolutely belong to this one particular person. So there is no concept of absolute ownership, that I own this particular land. The more of a so idea of there was a collective ownership. One of the ways in which all the, let's say, invaders, I should say, and those who went on to rule India, whether it be the Delhi Sultanate or whether it be the Mughals, they have not interfered too much into the land revenue system. They have continued this idea of the village ownership or an idea of the local self-government. They continued that. So yes, they brought some of the reforms, such as Akbar has brought some reforms. Some small minor changes will be there, but those changes, those impacts were not very intrusive to the people. They were in a way, okay, that's fine, that someone wants the land revenue in cash, someone wants in kind, that's fine. Some changes will be there, but that was not as intrusive as the Britishers have made it to be. Right? Now let us understand the pre-British structure one by one. So village community was the unit of the local self-government and the land revenue administration. Okay. So it was not personal based, rather a community based system. Idea of an absolute ownership did not exist pre-British agrarian structure. Yes, there would have been the, okay, this is your land, that land, but an absolute criteria does not exist. All the class connected with the land possesses some right, whether I'm owning that land or whether I'm cultivating that land. Everyone has some sort of a rights with respect to themselves. So cultivator had the right to cultivate and the security of tenure, that I will not be evicted by the other person, because who is watching? The whole village is watching. So you can say a village brotherhood or the village community was the safeguard for each and every person. The patel or the village headman, known as the mamlatdar, this is the keyword that you need to remember. Mamlatdar. He was the collector of the revenue and he used to pass that revenue, a part of that revenue, to the ruler or the nawab, whosoever is there. ठीक है? Though जो भी, whosoever is running that place, for example, let's say in Bengal, earlier the authority was for the Mughals, then the local nawabs. So they have to provide this revenue to these people. That's fine. Internal, where, for example, any dispute happened, any issue is there. So who will solve this dispute? This village itself will solve the dispute. And within the village, the concept of panchayat, that is the 5 people. Panchayat means 5 people. Panch, that is 5 people. 5 elderly people will come up, and with the consultation, with the arbitration, they will solve all the disputes which are there. So this was the idea for the agrarian structure pre-British time. Understood? Chalo. Now, what was the thought of the Britishers? We'll see more in detail in the next time. For example, Britishers now needed the land revenue, especially post the Battle of Buxar. Post Battle of Buxar, they got the Diwani rights. So they used this land revenue to buy this raw material and send this raw material to England, in very basic layman terms. So they require this land revenue, and that was the principal source of income for the East India Company, land revenue. Hence the idea was to extract as much land, as much revenue as possible from the land. Jitna kar sakte hain, as much as possible, we will extract out of the land. They considered India as a very vast state, as if it's a big jagir for them. And they are entitled to the economic rent out of it, because they have defeated all the local rulers. They have defeated they have eroded the Mughal authority. Now they are the ones, they've defeated everyone, Marathas, and they've defeated Marathas, Mysore, later on Sikhs. Now we are the one who are supposed to take this economic rent. Okay? The cultivator are only reduced to the status of only just cultivate and take your wages. That's it. They disregarded the village community, which was there, in fact, which we have discussed just before. So the idea of the village community, the idea of the panchayat, everything was disregarded. They have put their own system of courts for the any dispute resolution, if any. And these courts itself were very biased, because headed by the European judge, while they will work against the EIC, you know, already biased, partisan. So it was known as the farming of the land revenues, not of the crops. And ultimately it proved counterproductive for the Britishers as well. Why? Because though they got a lot of profits out of it, but in the long run, all the land which they are extracting this land revenue, they have not led to the productivity of that land. So the productivity was compromised. Productivity was compromised of that particular land. Secondly, they have faced, so productivity went down, and they faced a lot of revolts, which we'll look at in the theme 3. A lot of revolts from the side of the people. Chalo. Now let us see the kind of the land revenue system. 3 major land revenue systems were done by the Britishers. The first one is the permanent settlement. You can see in the areas Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, Banaras, Nadan, Sirkar. These are the areas of the permanent settlement. Very rough idea, and this map you can make in your mains exam as well. That is why I have drawn with hand. In your main exam, you can draw this map. It needs to be just indicative maps. So around 19% of the total area was under the permanent settlement. Mahalwari system. Mahalwari system was in the major portion of UP, central province, in the Punjab area. You can see these places, right? Around 30% of the area under Mahalwari, and remaining 51% of the area under the Ryotwari. There were some minor changes were there at an individual level. Obviously, there are some small systems later on. For example, we'll read in the Indigo Revolution, in the Champaran, the Tinkatiya system. We'll read that. But overall, this was the 3 major systems that we have to read: permanent settlement, Mahalwari system, and Ryotwari system. Let us look at it one by one. The first system, that is the permanent settlement. From the name itself, the name is permanent settlement. Who are the people responsible for it? Lord Cornwallis, 1793. And who was the person who helped Lord Cornwallis to do it? Was John Shore, who later on became the Governor General himself from 1793 to 98. So he helped in the implementation of the permanent settlement system. So Lord Cornwallis and John Shore. So the areas we have already discussed. Later on, some areas of Awadh and Awadh, Lord Dalhousie wanted to implement Mahalwari system, but 1857 mutiny broke out. So Lord Canning introduced a Talakdari system, which is similar to the permanent settlement. One fact that you need to recall. Okay, later on. This fact is I have kept. Chalo. So let's talk about the permanent settlement. Now, what is permanent settlement? First of all, you see that is the first system which they have brought. Before that, we have discussed the hit and trial method of the Warren Hastings as well. He was not able to devise a system that what should be done. Then we have discussed that Lord Cornwallis has come. For example, Lord Warren Hastings started with a 5-year settlement system. Then he put it on the 1-year settlement system. Then Cornwallis came, he put a 10-year settlement system, and later on he made it a permanent. Now EIC does not want to go too much into the too much connection with the people. No. Why? To reduce the cost of the revenue collection. They wanted to make an ally who can extract the revenue from their side. So the IIC has given the rights to the zamindars to collect the revenue from the cultivator. So the cultivator will give the revenue to the zamindars, this revenue. Okay. Now zamindars are told to give us a fixed revenue, and this is what permanent settlement is. That the revenue amount which zamindar is supposed to give to the EIC is fixed. That this much revenue we need to the zamindars, and now you are the owner of the land. So zamindar was recognized as the owner of the land. These cultivators are not the owner of the land. They may own the land. To the Britishers, it does not matter. According to them, this area, for example, is under zamindar 1. Now within which you can have tenants at will. Those, for example, zamindar itself can own his land. For example, this much land is of zamindar itself, on which some people can be there, and there can be some small landowners can be there. But to extract the revenue out of this whole area is the responsibility of this zamindar, and the EIC will work only with him. Right? So EIC has nothing to do with the people. They just want to get some fixed amount of revenue from the from the zamindars. Remember, the fixed amount is there from the zamindar. First thing. Second, now the zamindar has to, he is the owner of the land, landlord. Zamindar can extract as much as he wants. Doesn't matter to EIC. For example, let's say EIC wanted 50,000 from the zamindar. Now it is up to the zamindar. He has to give 50,000 to the company, but he can extract 60,000, 70,000, and he want to keep some amount to himself. He can do that. EIC has no problem with respect to that. Okay? But EIC wants 50,000. That's all. You extract 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, doesn't matter to us. Okay? So this revenue, zamindars were given the freedom to decide how much to demand from the cultivator, and if you default, stiff penalties will be there. Now, some of the rights which were given to the zamindars, let's look at it. First, the alienable. If you are not able to provide us, let's say this 50,000 amount, that you will be, British can take it away. Alienable. That means you can be put out and the other one can be put in. Next is rentable. So zamindars can outsource this amount, can outsource. That means if zamindar 1 does not want to go ahead and extract this 50,000, he will give it to the zamindar 2 to this land. But to the EIC, who matters? Zamindar 1. बहुत आसान सा है. For example, I have the land. Let's say EIC has told me to collect this much money. To 50,000 I have to give to the EIC. I tell the other person, you give me 55,000, and I don't care now. He gives me 55,000, I give 50,000. So what happened? I have become the absentee landlord. I am the landlord, but I became an absentee landlord because I have outsourced this work to the other person. He will collect from the farmers, he will collect from the cultivators, he will give it to me, and finally I'll give 50,000 to the EIC. That is rentable. Third is heritable. Let's say I died, then my son, my brother, whosoever can take it as long as they can pay this amount. If they cannot pay this amount, then they will be taken out of this land. So the properties ARH, you can remember something like that. So HAR, HAR or some anything you can remember. Okay? So alienable, rentable and heritable. Then we have discussed the two types of cultivators, tenant at will. Those have no rights. And then those who are the occupancy tenant. So they themselves can rent it out. They can give it to anyone else. And it was also inheritable. Heritable. That means if that small cultivator who owned his land under the overarching zamindari land, if he dies, his son can get a land. Not very important. So what you need to focus in permanent settlement, the fixed revenue was from the EIC, from the zamindar to the EIC, the fixed revenue. Then the cultivators got that was not fixed. That is, the zamindar, he can demand as much as he wants. That is permanent settlement. Now let us look at the consequences of the permanent settlement. Let us say for the Britishers. So first they got the financial security because the amount was fixed. So they were sure that this much amount we will get. But later on we will see that this amount itself created problems for them. Why? Or you can see, let's we see. Then cost of the running the administration has reduced because they don't have to go out and meet these people to collect the revenue. They have outsourced to zamindar, and whatever ways you want to collect, you collect. And they got a new political ally, that is the zamindar. Why? For example, let's say peasants have revolted. They cannot pay this much tax. EIC has demanded 50,000. Now zamindar is extracting 1 lakh rupees. Let's say 3 layers of zamindar is there. This one extract 1 lakh, he gives 70,000 to above, 70,000 gives 60,000 to above, then he gives 50,000 to the Britishers. So a lot of intermediaries are there. Obviously, the peasants will, obviously the British have set the amount so high. The first 50,000 itself is so high. Britishers have kept it constant so that keeping in mind in the future, we need more money. So they kept already it so high. Then it increased so much from 50,000 to 1 lakh. Now the peasants are, obviously they'll revolt. When they will revolt, so they need the help of the zamindars to quell these revolts. So zamindars have become the new political allies for the Britishers. Okay, fine. What about the farmers? Along with that, one more phenomena is happening. That is deindustrialization, that we'll discuss next session. Deindustrialization means there is those industries which we have discussed in India, those were there earlier. Now they were destroyed. There are no more industries. When industries are not there, they became tenant at will. Now these people, when those who are working at just 1 second, those who are working in these industries, they got, industries are finished. Now these people will do what? They will come to the agriculture. These all will become the tenant at will. Why? The bargaining power will reduce because you have a lot of supply of the laborers, a lot of supply who can cultivate. Now this cultivator says, I will give you the rent. Second one says, no, I cannot give you the rent. So you are gone. Those who can take, they can do the cultivation. So the bargaining power has reduced of these farmers because the numbers have increased. Simple formula of demand and supply. So those who excess labor which is there in the industrial sector, that converted into the agricultural sector. And that started the practice of begari as well. We will see how this begari means free labor. Now, for example, this cultivator, because of lack of bargaining, he has promised the zamindar that I will give you 1 lakh rupees. Okay, fine. From where he will give 1 lakh rupees? He has to do some crops, let's say. Now, for buying the crops, he has to take the money from moneylender. Moneylender, he has taken the money at high interest rate. He is not able to pay the amount, then moneylender will take up his land, or the moneylender will say, no, you will do the work and I will not pay you. So ultimately farmer got no money. He has to do the work, free labor he has to do. That is known as the begari. Okay, chalo. Other unintended consequences. First, the landed aristocracy, these zamindars, they have become wealthy and lazy because these are the absentee landlords. Without doing anything, you are getting 50 to 20,000 without doing anything, because of the, so in these intermediaries are doing the work for you. You are getting the 10,000 in your account without doing anything. And you start to live in the cities. These zamindars started to live in the cities. They have no idea what is going on in the farming. They just are getting the money and they are paying it to the Britishers. Then that we have discussed, the outsourcing of the land. So much land was outsourced. So it has become so much subtenants and middlemen have increased. So many middlemen have increased. So as many middlemen increase, everyone will want what? Their share of money. And obviously, if they don't get their share of money, why they will be middleman? So around 70 to 80% of the revenue went into the taxes. So the investment back into the agriculture was none. For example, you need some sort of investment in the agriculture. For example, for improvement of the soil, you need some sort of fertilizer, some sort of seeds, new seeds you need. Nothing was done. New canals, water sources, irrigation, nothing was done. No improvement in the technology, no improvement in the agriculture. So these are the consequences of the permanent settlement. Now, Britishers also faced a lot of consequences. For example, later on, they have realized that they have fixed the amount. Now they can see that these intermediaries can extract as much as 1 lakh rupees, and we are finally getting only 50,000. So we are missing out on a big opportunity. These will see कि भाई इतने सारे intermediaries have increased. What we need to do? Secondly, a lot of rewards started to happen. And this is not, no one wants this, because when so much rewards start to happen, they cannot do the ease of doing business, because they can quell these rewards with the help of the zamindars. But ultimately, they will require these rewards to be less. We have discussed how they have taken over the Pindaris, why they want to get over the Pindaris, why they want to get over the Thugis. Pindaris were Lord Hastings and Thugis William Bentinck. So agrarian rewards, intermediaries have increased. They have learned from their mistakes. So they introduced the new system. They said, this system is not working. So whatever has been done under permanent settlement, theek hai. Uske baad we will convert to new systems. We will work for the new systems. And the new systems are Ryotwari and Mahalwari. Now comes the new system, that is a Ryotwari. Now they have learned that directly putting this big zamindar in is a mistake. So what they will try? They will try to go directly to the cultivator. Okay? They will get the help of the administrator. We will see Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed, who will introduce this system in the Madras presidency. But they will try to avoid this zamindari middleman. This is your Ryotwari system. Ryotwari system you can see in Madras area, the Bombay area, and the Assam area. Majorly these three areas and other systems. So around 51% of the area was under the Ryotwari. They started this system on an experiment basis in the Baramahal district under the leadership of Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed in the Madras, Baramahal district. So company directly collected revenue from the farmers, direct revenue. Madras was initially under the permanent settlement, but Thomas Munro convinced the director of the East India Company to convert this area into Ryotwari or direct settlement, because they have seen the fallouts from the permanent settlement. So Thomas Munro ne bola ki bhai, let's change the system. And you can see Thomas Munro work under the times of the Lord Hastings, 1813 to 1823. Now this is the system of the Ryotwari system. The Britishers, the cultivators. So Britishers have given some rights to the cultivators, and the response, the cultivators will give the taxes to the Britishers. Okay. These taxes now can be revised. Unlike the permanent settlement system, this can be revised. So Britishers claim the property rights. Yes, we are the property holder. They can enhance the tax, can revise the tax. And it was also mentioned some of the measures for the revenue relief during the famine. For example, any famine happened, then we will also help you with respect to that. Now the cultivators, there are some ideas that if you don't pay any taxes, you will be evicted, obviously. If you don't pay any tax, we will evict you. Farmers could sell, mortgage, lease their land. Yes, they have that particular right, as long as those who are cultivating can pay the tax. And the cultivators got some sort of a proprietary right, because they can use, sell, mortgage or lease this land. Okay? Now the directly the zamindari layer has been taken out. If we talk about the consequences of the Ryotwari, even though this was a promise, this was written in the system, but this was rarely done. This was very rarely done. So they have to pay taxes even in during the time of drought and famine. These zamindars, if we see, these zamindars were replaced by a one big giant zamindar, that is the East India Company. So East India Company has become that big one giant zamindar. The sub-leasing has started because these cultivators now can lease this to someone else. So leasing problem again started, this sub-leasing, sub-infeudation, these things. One more important thing is the cash revenue, because now the company wanted all the money in the cash, no kind, provide all the money in the cash. So to provide the cash money, they were forced, some sort of force was there that you need to put this cash crops in. Cash crops such as tea, sugar cane, coffee, all these things. This is also known as the commercialization of the agriculture. We will repeat it again at the end of our session. Commercialization of the agriculture. Okay. So these cash crops have increased, but to follow, for example, to do these cash crops, you need some more inputs that cannot be done in the proper system. You need mechanization, for example, good iron plows, you need some more inputs, you need labor inputs, seed inputs, fertilizer inputs, all the things that you need for that. And thus they have to take more loans, more indebtedness. More indebtedness means dependent upon the money lender. Now the money lender later on, what he will say, he will take over the land, he will get the land. Obviously the money lender himself will not do anything, he will go for those cultivator and they will say, do it begari. That's it. So the money lender got this land, and obviously he will not go ahead and cultivate the land, he will put someone else. So what has increased? The landless farmers have increased and begari has increased. They're doing the work without any pay. Then your third system, that is the Mahalwari system. Mahal itself means village. Now Mahalwari system you can see in these areas, some parts of UP, Central Province and Punjab area. These are the areas of the Mahalwari. These are the areas of the Great Ganges Plain. Oh, sorry, this Northern Plain. Not whole, but some part of it. So very fertile area that is there, very fertile area. Hence the revenue is very high there. So major portion of UP, Central Province, Punjab, around 30% of the area. Let us see here. In North India, Punjab, the joint land rights on the village were common. So the traditional system which was there, British tried, let's exploit this traditional system. Let's utilize this traditional structure in the new form known as the Mahalwari. So the joint land right that we have studied in the pre-British time, British thought, let us utilize that only. Okay? For example, in 1822, Northwest Province initially had the permanent settlement but transformed to the Mahalwari under the Holt Mackenzie. Okay? Just remember it. Now this is the system. Now the Britishers are not concerned with the individual cultivator. They are concerned with the village as a whole community. That is the Mahal. This is the unit of assessment. Okay? And now the village community say, the Britishers will say that this much money that we need, and they can revise the tax slab. Okay, and the village community got some rights. Village community has the right to distribute the tax target that okay, you have to give us this much, you have to give us this much, you have to give us this much. So this was done by the village community. So they can distribute the tax targets to the cultivators, and it was taken by the Lambardar, that is the who collected the amount and gave it to the Britishers. So remember this term, that is Lambardar. So the cultivator each contribute his share. They were liable for others. right to sell and mortgage their properties. That means now cultivator 2 is also liable for cultivator 1. Why? Because this is the whole village community we are talking about. So one will make sure the other is paying, that kind of a thing. So this is your Mahalwari system. Now village itself does not necessarily mean the entire village population, but is a group of elder, notable, high caste people. Obviously those will control the whole thing, because Indian society divided on the caste. Remember that, है ना? Society में you'll read, or in your ancient medieval history must have read that how divided Indian society was there. So those people who are making this decision obviously are the high caste people, and those who are the landless, those who are, for example, this begari, all these are then done by the mostly by the lower caste people. Now the consequences of this Mahalwari system, as we have discussed, that these are the very fertile areas. So they wanted around 50 to 70% of the revenue. Whatever you're earning from that particular place, 50 to 70% you have to give. Imagine your salary is 30,000, the government says, or 1 lakh, and government says 50,000 to 70,000 you have to pay as a tax, right? Laffer curve, you remember? So you have to pay that much amount as tax. Imagine. So that's a problem. The generation past, fragmentation of the land started, a lot of land getting fragmented, and the productivity has declined. They wanted the revenue in cash. Whom? The Britishers. Hence, that the story that we have discussed, they have to borrow. The money lender, they form very high interest rate, they cannot pay, and then money lender took the land and the leasing. The same story continued. So one thing that is common in all the three systems, which you can see, that is subleasing, indebtedness, landlessness, and the begari, right? All these things become very common in all the systems. Though some methodologies are different, means are different, but the ends are same. First, maximum revenue extraction for the Britishers, and the maximum extortion for the farmers. So subleasing, indebtedness, landlessness became more and more common in the Mahalwari region. Now Mahalwari is also known as the modified permanent settlement. Kyun? Because remember this Lambardar, this person became kind of a zamindar. Or the village itself, you can say. A village means this person only. He became a kind of a zamindar. The other names for this are joint lease, brotherhood, Gramwari, and Mahal holding. These are the similar terms in the local areas. So this is also known as the modified permanent settlement system. So now we have discussed all the three systems. One concept, commercialization of agriculture, we have already discussed it, because there was a demand of the money to be paid in cash. Earlier you must have read in your ancient medieval history that earlier the demands were also there in a kind. That means you can pay, for example, if you are getting 60 kgs of rice, you can pay 30 kgs of rice or 20 kgs of rice. But now the demand is on the cash. So they, and plus the English also forced to go for these cash crops, because you'll get more money. Cash crops means more inputs, and the whole money lender story we have discussed. Cash crop has one more consequence. What is the consequence? Now you don't have the crops, the food crops. Now when cash crops, whenever there is a problem of the, let's say, famine, then you are nowhere to go, and that will cause the problem of the food insecurity, leave behind nutritional insecurity. So food security very poor, and that will cause the famine and the death of the millions. Okay. One more problem with the cash crop is that cash crop is also dependent too much on the world economy. For example, when we'll discuss the Deccan Revolt, we will see how this, for example, this civil war or the wars outside India also will impact these cash crops. Okay, chalo. Then we'll talk about overall consequences of the bland revenue system. We have discussed the common consequences. Now let's just repeat it and put it into a category. The first consequence you can see on the land system, then you can see on the institutions, then farmers, and then infrastructure creation. Let's look at it one by one. First, the land becomes a property. We have discussed that before the Britishers were there, this concept of absolute ownership was not there. Now the land has become a property which can be mortgaged, leased, one person to the other person, alienated from that person. And that has led to the material transformation in the agricultural sector itself. Now the people are divided into landlord, tenants, and the laborers. Now next, institutions. Now the dispute resolutions are being done in the courts. So the image of the panchayat has reduced. They cannot do anything. External zamindar, external courts, that's all. The rural industry destroyed. That is the consequence of the deindustrialization that we'll discuss the next session. Deindustrialization. Next, farmers have to follow the serfdom, that is nothing but begari, food insecurity, and the cash economy and the indebted farmer to the money lenders. We have discussed that. Next, lastly, the infrastructure creation. Though canals have increased, we have discussed, for example, Lord Dalhousie has created what? Upper Ganga Canal. Your homework to see Upper Ganga Canal map. Map देखना है Upper Ganga Canal का. So, but the taxes, corresponding taxes have increased. For example, if you're releasing the canal water, and canals have the problems of salinity, swamps, that overall decreases the soil fertility. The same problem being faced in the Punjab and Rajasthan of the decreasing soil fertility, increasing soil salinity, and the lack of the capitalist economy. Capitalist economy means, for example, these mechanization. This is not there. New seeds, good seeds, fertilizer, these things are not there. So these are the consequences of the British tenure system. If we talk about the other issues, so we have discussed the subleasing, fragmentation, productivity decline, then no investment in the seeds, fertilizer, contract farming, wooden plow. You can see 97% of the people use wooden plow and only 3% the iron plow. Leave about the tractor and all these things. This was the situation at the independence. Then you have the drain of wealth, because the excess of the taxes were used for the exports of the raw material. So for example, they are using the taxes money taken from the India, use that money to pay for the raw material that we go to the Britain. Imagine the plunder that is there. And then because of which, when this will be a lot of revolts will be there, it will lead to the social banditry, robbery, dacoits that we have discussed, the pendaris and the thugis. And different areas, different things were there. So these are the consequences of this British situation. Now this was because of these things. This was the situation of Indian agriculture at the independence. You have 48% of the villagers who have become subtenants and tenant. They hold only 25%. 45% of the villagers, they own no land at all. They are the farm laborers, petty traders, or doing the begari. And you have the 7%, top 7%, the villagers, they are the richest and they are the zamindars. They own 75% of the fertile land, sorry. So you can witness the lack of the equity in the agriculture. There is no equity. Plus, obviously, there is no productivity, because we have discussed there is no capitalist agriculture. Wooden plow, 93% people use wooden plow. Now, this 7% were the zamindars. They were having the political influence. They were belonging to the upper caste. They will become the part of the political class as well once the your constitution will be formed. That is why B.R. Ambedkar talked about the class struggle. This is the class struggle. Your zamindars and your poor people. And these zamindars are the upper caste and these are the lower caste. And that is why before the social justice is not there, before you won't give opportunity to these people to rise up, this everything will be dominated by these people. And that is why post independence, the government has come up with the first thing for the land reforms, that is the zamindari abolition. That institutionalization of this thing needs to go ahead, then land ceiling reforms, and then the tenancy reforms. ठीक है, चलो. Let us discuss one question. Let's wrap the session. So who among the following were associated with the introduction of the Ryotwari settlement in India during the British rule? Lord Cornwallis, Alexander Reed, and Thomas Munro. Pause the video, and very easy question to answer. 2017 this question was asked. Obviously, we have discussed Lord Cornwallis in 1793. He plus John Shore started what? Permanent settlement. So obviously one will not be the answer. One is not there. One gone, and answer is 2 and 3. Very easy in this question. Even if you don't know about Alexander Reed, then also you can get this question right. So the answer is Alexander Reed and Thomas Munro in the Baramahal district in the Madras presidency. They started in 1820. Okay? Chalo. So with this, we finished the session. Today we have talked about the land revenue policies. We talked about what was the situation of the India before your pre-British phase, how the Indian economy was transformed, what was the existing land tenure system or the money collection system pre-British area, then what was the perception of the British, land revenue system, permanent settlement, Ryotwari and Mahalwari. So with this, let's finish the session. See you all in the next session. We'll continue with the economy impact of the Britishers, and we'll look at the second side of it. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.